What are standards? Standards are the rules you set for yourself, the minimum requirements you'll accept in your life. Not what you desire, not what you hope for, not what you wish for, but what you will not live without. Your standards define your life. Most people have wishes, not standards. They wish they were more successful. They wish they had better relationships. They wish they were healthier. They wish they had more time, more money, more opportunity. But wishes aren't standards. Wishes are like seeds without soil, without water, without care. They don't grow into anything substantive. Standards, on the other hand, are non-negotiable. They're the line in the sand that says, I will not accept less than this. When you truly set a standard, you move heaven and earth to live up to it. You don't try, you do. You don't hope, you commit. I'm reminded of a man I met years ago. He told me he wanted financial independence. I asked him, what are you doing to achieve it? He said, well, I hope to save more this year. I'm trying to learn about investing. I wish I had started earlier. Do you hear the language? Hope, try, wish. These are not the words of someone with standards. These are the words of someone with wishes. Compare that to another gentleman I met. When I asked him the same question, he said, I save 30% of every dollar I earn, no exceptions. I read one book on finance every month. I meet with my financial advisor quarterly. I track every expense. Do you hear the difference? This man had standards, not wishes. And that's the first key to raising your standards, recognizing the difference between what you wish for and what you're committed to. What you're willing to accept versus what you're not willing to accept. Why standards matter. Now you might be thinking, that sounds good, but does it really make that much of a difference? Let me tell you something, it makes all the difference in the world. Your standards don't just influence your life, they create your life. Look at any area where you're excelling, and I guarantee you set high standards there. Look at any area where you're struggling, and I promise you've accepted lower standards there. Your health, it's a reflection of your standards for what you eat, how you move, how you rest. Your finances, they're a reflection of your standards for earning, saving, investing, and spending. Your relationships, they're a reflection of your standards for how you communicate, how you show up, what you contribute, and what you accept from others. Your career, it's a reflection of your standards for your work ethic, your skill development, your value creation. Your happiness, it's a reflection of your standards for your mindset, your gratitude, your purpose. Everything, and I mean everything in your life right now is there because you've accepted it. Either consciously or unconsciously, you've set a standard that has created your current reality. And here's the amazing thing. When you raise your standards, your life rises with them. Not instantly. That's not how life works. But inevitably. When you truly raise a standard and commit to it, the universe conspires to help you meet it. The cost of low standards. Before we talk about how to raise your standards, let's talk about the cost of not doing so. Because there is a price to pay for low standards, and it's a steep one. Low standards cost you opportunity. When you accept less from yourself, you get less from life. It's as simple as that. The promotion that could have been yours, the business that could have thrived, the relationship that could have flourished, all sacrificed on the altar of low standards. Low standards cost you time. Years can slip by while you accept conditions you should have changed. Decades can pass while you get by instead of truly living. Low standards cost you fulfillment. There's a unique kind of dissatisfaction that comes from knowing you're capable of more but settling for less. It's a quiet desperation that eats away at your soul. And perhaps most costly of all, low standards become a habit, a way of life. They become your identity. That's just who I am. You tell yourself, I'm just not good with money. I'm just not a morning person. I'm just not disciplined. These statements aren't facts. They're confessions of low standards. I remember talking to a young lady who told me she was just not good at relationships. I asked her, if your life depended on being good at relationships, could you figure it out? Of course she said yes. It wasn't ability she lacked, it was standards. She had accepted her relationship struggles as part of her identity rather than seeing them as a result of her standards. The cost of low standards is a life half-lived, and life is too precious, too short, and too full of potential to accept that. Why people keep low standards? Given the of low standards, why do so many people maintain them? There are several reasons. First, they don't know any better. If you grew up around people with low standards, you might not even realize higher standards are possible. Your environment has a powerful influence on what you believe is normal, acceptable, or possible. Second, raising standards is uncomfortable. It requires change, and change is hard. It means admitting that what you've been doing isn't good enough. It means facing the gap between where you are and where you could be. Many people prefer the comfort of mediocrity to the discomfort of growth. Third, raising standards means responsibility. When you raise your standards, you can no longer blame circumstances, other people, or bad luck for your results. You have to own your life. And ownership is both the greatest privilege and the greatest responsibility there is. Fourth, many people confuse standards with perfection. They think that setting high standards means expecting perfection from themselves or others. But that's not what standards are about. Standards aren't about perfection, they're about direction. They're about consistently moving towards something better. And finally, many people simply don't believe they deserve better. This is perhaps the saddest reason of all. They've internalized the message from society, from past experiences, from negative people, that they don't deserve excellence, abundance, joy, or fulfillment. And so they set their standards accordingly. But I'm here to tell you, you deserve extraordinary standards. You deserve to live a life of excellence. Not because you've earned it, although you have. Not because you've worked for it, although you will. But simply because you're here, a miraculous being with unlimited potential. How to raise your standards. So now let's talk about how to raise your standards. This is the practical part. The part where philosophy meets action. 1. Become aware of your current standards. You can't change what you don't acknowledge. The first step to raising your standards is becoming aware of what they currently are. And remember, your standards aren't what you say they are. They're what your actions show they are. Look at the results in your life right now. Your bank account doesn't lie. Your health doesn't lie. Your relationships don't lie. Your calendar doesn't lie. They all reflect your true standards. Take time to honestly assess where your standards are right now in each area of your life. Not with judgment, but with awareness. Awareness is always the first step toward change. 2. Decide what you want. After awareness comes decision. You must decide what you truly want in each area of your life. Not what you think you can get, what you want. Dream big here. Don't limit yourself. What kind of health do you want? What kind of relationships? What kind of financial situation? What kind of career or business? What kind of contribution do you want to make? What kind of person do you want to be? Your answers to these questions will help you define your new standards. Remember, standards are what you will not live without. So what will you no longer live without in each area of your life? 3. Connect your standards to your values. Standards without values are like houses without foundations. They collapse under pressure. Your standards must be rooted in what matters most to you. If you value freedom, your financial standards should reflect that. If you value connection, your relationship standards should reflect that. If you value growth, your career standards should reflect that. When your standards connect to your deepest values, they become non-negotiable. They become part of who you are, not just what you do. 4. Raise your standards gradually. Now, a word of caution. When people get inspired, they often try to change everything at once. They go from no exercise to 2 hours a day at the gym. They go from no budget to tracking every penny. They go from no boundaries to rigid rules in their relationships. And what happens? They burn out. They get overwhelmed. They revert to old patterns. Instead, raise your standards gradually. Start with one area of your life. Start with one standard in that area. Master it. Make it a habit. Then move on to the next. For example, if you want to raise your health standards, you might start with drinking enough water each day. Once that's a habit, you might add a daily walk, then adequate sleep, then better nutrition. Step by step, your standards rise. 5. Surround yourself with people who have high standards. You've heard the saying, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. There's profound truth in that. Your environment shapes your standards. If you're surrounded by people who settle, who complain, who make excuses, your standards will gravitate toward theirs. But if you're surrounded by people who excel, who grow, who take responsibility, your standards will rise to meet theirs. Be intentional about the company you keep. Seek out mentors, friends, and colleagues who have higher standards than you do. Their influence will naturally pull you upward. 6. Create systems that support your standards. Willpower is overrated. Discipline is limited. If you want to maintain higher standards, you need systems that support them. If your financial standard is to save 20% of your income, set up automatic transfers. If your health standard is to exercise daily, schedule it in your calendar. If your relationship standard is to have meaningful conversations, create a weekly date night. Systems turn standards into habits, and habits create results. 7. Track your progress. What gets measured gets managed. If you want to raise your standards, you need to track your progress. Not to judge yourself, but to stay aware. Create simple ways to measure how well you're adhering to your new standards. It might be a journal, an app, a spreadsheet, or regular check-ins with an accountability partner. The form doesn't matter as much as the function to keep your standards front and center in your awareness. 8. Celebrate small wins. Raising your standards is challenging work. It's going against the grain of your past habits, maybe even your past identity. To sustain this effort, you need to celebrate yourself along the way. Did you maintain your new standard for a day? Celebrate it a week. Celebrate bigger? A month? Bigger still. Celebration isn't just about feeling good, it's about reinforcing the neural pathways that connect your new standards to pleasure rather than pain. 9. Expect resistance. When you raise your standards, expect resistance both from within and without. Your old self will resist. Your old habits will resist. Sometimes even people around you will resist. This resistance doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. Quite the opposite, it means you're doing something right. Growth always meets resistance. The key is to expect it, plan for it, and move through it. 10. Be patient with the process. Finally, be patient with the process. Raising your standards is a lifelong journey, not a one-time event. There will be setbacks. There will be days when you fall short. There will be times when progress seems slow. That's all part of the process. The key is to recommit each day, to keep your eyes on your standards rather than your failures, to focus on progress rather than perfection. The ripple effect of raised standards. Now, let me tell you something powerful about raising your standards. When you raise your standards in one area of your life, it creates a ripple effect that touches every other area. When you raise your standards for your health, you have more energy, and that affects your work. When you raise your standards for your finances, you have more freedom, and that affects your relationships. When you raise your standards for your mindset, you have more positivity, and that affects everything. It's not about compartmentalizing your life into neat categories. It's about recognizing that your life is an integrated whole, and excellence in one area supports excellence in others. I remember working with a gentleman who decided to raise his standards for his physical health. He started exercising regularly, eating better, getting enough sleep. And yes, his health improved, but so did his business. He found he had more energy, more clarity, more confidence. His business grew by 40% that year. Was it because he could do more push-ups? No, it was because raising standards in one area created a positive cascade throughout his life. The challenge of maintaining raised standards. Now, I want to be honest with you. Raising your standards is one thing, maintaining them is another. It's relatively easy to decide in a moment of inspiration that you're going to live differently. It's much harder to live up to that decision day after day, especially when the inspiration fades and life gets busy. That's why so many New Year's resolutions fail by February. That's why so many diets last only a few weeks. That's why so many business plans gather dust. But here's what separates those who transform their lives through raised standards from those who briefly flirt with the idea before reverting to old patterns. The ones who succeed understand that maintaining higher standards requires a support system. It requires accountability. It requires community. It requires regular renewal of the commitment. And perhaps most importantly, it requires turning those standards into identity. Let me explain what I mean by that last point. When a standard becomes part of your identity, you no longer have to force yourself to live up to it. You just do it because it's who you are. For example, let's say you set a new standard that you will save 20% of your income. At first, it feels like a restriction. It feels like something you have to make yourself do. But over time, if you stick with it, something magical happens. You don't think of yourself as someone who is trying to save money. You think of yourself as a saver. It becomes part of your identity. And when something is part of your identity, maintaining it becomes much easier. You don't debate whether you'll do it each day. You just do it because it's who you are. That's the ultimate goal of raising your standards, not just to change what you do, but to change who you are. To evolve into a person for whom excellence is not an event, but a habit. The standards that matter most. Now let's talk about which standards matter most. Because while you can raise your standards in virtually any area of your life, some standards have a disproportionate impact on your results. First, your standards for yourself. How you treat yourself, what you expect from yourself, what you will and won't accept from yourself, these are foundational. If you don't respect yourself, if you don't demand excellence from yourself, it's very difficult to create an excellent life. Second, your standards for your mindset. Your thoughts create your emotions drive your actions, and your actions determine your results. If you accept negative thinking, limited beliefs, or a victim mentality, everything else suffers. Third, your standards for your health. Your body is the vehicle through which you experience life. If you don't maintain that vehicle, everything else is compromised. Fourth, your standards for your relationships. No success can compensate for failure in the home. And beyond that, the quality of your life is largely determined by the quality of your relationships. Fifth, your standards for your work. Your work is a significant part of your contribution to the world. Whether you're an employee, an entrepreneur, a student, or a homemaker, the standard to which you perform your work matters deeply. Sixth, your standards for growth. In a rapidly changing world, if you're not growing, you're falling behind. Your standards for learning, for skill development, for adaptation are crucial. And seventh, your standards for contribution. At the end of your life, what will matter most is not what you accumulated, but what you gave. Your standards for how you serve, how you add value, how you make a difference, these will define your legacy. Focus on raising your standards in these areas, and you'll create a life of extraordinary quality. The courage to raise your standards. Raising your standards requires courage. The courage to believe you deserve better. The courage to step out of your comfort zone. The courage to risk failure. The courage to face the gap between where you are and where you want to be. Not everyone has this courage. Many people will live their entire lives according to standards they inherited rather than standards they chose. They'll accept conditions they should have changed. They'll settle for less than they're capable of creating. But I believe you have this courage. The very fact that you're here, listening to these words, suggests you're someone who wants more from life. Someone who believes in possibility. Someone who's willing to do the work of growth. So I challenge you today, have the courage to raise your standards. Not because your current life is bad, but because your future life can be extraordinary. The decision that changes everything. We've covered a lot of ground today. We've talked about what standards are, why they matter, how to raise them, and how to maintain them. But all of this information is worthless without one crucial element, a decision. A real decision is measured by the fact that you've taken a new action. If there's no action, you haven't truly decided. So right now, I invite you to make a decision. Decide on one standard you're going to raise immediately. Not tomorrow, not next week, not when you have more time or more money or more support. Right now. Maybe it's a standard for how you start your day. Maybe it's a standard for how you communicate with your loved ones. Maybe it's a standard for the quality of your work. Whatever it is, decide now and take action today. Because here's the truth, the quality of your life right now, in this moment, is a result of the standards you've set for yourself up to this point. And the quality of your life 1 year from now, 5 years from now, decades from now, will be determined by the standards you set and maintain from this point forward. You have the power to raise your standards at any moment. And when you do, everything changes. The philosophy of excellence. Let me share with you what I call the philosophy of excellence. It's a simple but profound way of thinking about how to live. Excellence is not an act but a habit. It's not something you do occasionally when you feel inspired or when someone is watching. It's something you do consistently as a matter of course, because that's who you are. Excellence is not about perfection. It's about purpose. It's about intentionality. It's about giving your best in this moment, whatever your best may be on this day. Excellence is not about comparison with others. It's about comparison with your previous self. Are you better today than you were yesterday? Are you growing? Are you advancing? Are you raising your standards incrementally but consistently? Excellence is a journey, not a destination. There is no point at which you can say, I have achieved excellence, and now I can rest. Excellence is a commitment to continuous improvement, to lifelong growth, to becoming a little bit better each day. And perhaps most importantly, excellence is a choice available to all. It doesn't require special talents or advantages. It requires only the decision to demand more of yourself than others might expect, to set standards that exceed the norm, to pursue quality in all things. This philosophy of excellence, when applied through the vehicle of raised standards, creates a life of extraordinary quality. Not instantly, but inevitably. The legacy of raised standards. As we close, I want you to consider the legacy of raised standards. Because when you raise your standards, you don't just change your life. You influence countless others. Think about it. When you raise your standards for your health, you inspire others to care for their bodies. When you raise your standards for your relationships, you show others what healthy connection looks like. When you raise your standards for your work, you elevate what's possible in your field. Your raised standards create a ripple effect that extends far beyond your immediate experience. They touch your family, your friends, your colleagues, and even strangers who observe you as an example. And perhaps most powerfully, they extend across time. The standards you set today will influence future generations. Your children, your students, your mentees, they will inherit the standards you demonstrate. What greater legacy could there be than to show others what's possible? To embody excellence in such a way that it becomes contagious? To raise the bar not just for yourself, but for all who come after you. This is the ultimate impact of raised standards. They outlive you. They become your contribution to a better world. The invitation. So here's my invitation to you. Don't just listen to these words. Don't just nod in agreement. Don't just feel temporarily inspired. Take action. Decide today that you will no longer accept less than you can be, do, give, or create. Decide today that good enough is no longer good enough for you. Decide today that excellence will be your standard, not occasionally but consistently. Start small if you need to. Focus on one area at a time. Be patient with the process. But start. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and the journey to an extraordinary life begins with a single raised standard. You have within you right now everything you need to begin. You have the awareness. You have the ability. You have the potential. All you need now is the decision. Will you raise your standards today? Will you demand more of yourself than others might expect? Will you commit to excellence not as an event but as a lifestyle? The choice. It always has been. Start small if you need to. Focus on one area at a time. Be patient with the process. But start. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and the journey to an extraordinary life begins with a single raised standard. You have within you right now everything you need to begin. You have the awareness. You have the ability. You have the potential. All you need now is the decision. Will you raise your standards today? Will you demand more of yourself than others might expect? Will you commit to excellence not as an event but as a lifestyle? The choice is yours. It always has been. And that choice, more than any circumstance, any background, any limitation, will determine the quality of your life. Choose well. Choose excellence. Choose to raise your standards. And just that, thank you.